without guaranteeing Ukrainian safety, there is no safety of Europe. We are valuable enough to be covered by the umbrella of military protection. This de facto neutrality has not delivered anything in terms of safety.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Euro-Atlantic Course. I'm your host, Maria Romanenko. How do we keep Ukraine safe? Ukraine has applied for a NATO membership, but the country is also awaiting a decision on the European Union accession. How soon can Ukraine expect to be admitted? Does it need to win the war first? These are the questions that we'll look at in today's program. So if you want to find out more, please continue watching this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our videos in the future. We have a good panel of speakers today, representatives of the Center for Defense Strategies and National Institute for Strategic Studies, a former Ukrainian ambassador to the US, a philosopher and a political expert. So we can expect a good and well-balanced discussion. First, the ex-ambassador of Ukraine to the United States, Valeriy Chaly, explains why a NATO membership is crucial for Ukraine.
We should be ready to counter any arguments of our partners, the alliance members, to remove those arguments so that the country becomes part of the Euro-Atlantic security and receiving an umbrella structure against Russia or any eventual enemies to attack us in the future. I think this is a formula for our victory that cannot be limited by the occupation and reconstruction of Ukraine, compensation by Russia. It should also include membership in the NATO, because without that, it would be an unfinished process. You remember Russia's effort to take away the Crimea back in 1993? They were... And now, then we could minimize the impact and prevent them from grabbing all the Ukrainian territory. And then Ukraine started trying to buy out some compromise and was avoiding conflict with Russia, at least full-scale war. But even then, there were clashes up to the military level, being stopped by political resolutions. So this policy, de facto, is a neutrality one, though it was not vested anywhere in the documents but for the Constitution. And this de facto neutrality has not delivered anything in terms of safety. No positive step towards Russia, never paid back. Russia perceives that as weakness. And we need to find a way to protect us. The preferable option is the NATO. The NATO countries will be glad to have two borders between them and Russia. I think that we should show this information to our partners and show them the alternative value. In our political domain, everyone should be very well aware what they're voting for, and that the pathway is with no alternative. Without going to the NATO, we cannot be admitted to the EU. So safety first.
Oleksandr Khara from the Center for Defense Strategies explains why the West should have Ukraine, including its occupied peninsula Crimea, on the agenda.
If we don't have an option to have our own safety and security of the state, genocide will come again. If we're talking about some vague guarantees of security from Russia. We need to speak only about the instruments that can enable the safety of the country in its recognized borders. We are strong as a part of a collective West. And secondly, when we're talking about alternatives, we do not take into account one simple thing. Russian Federation, being weak in the battlefield, it's a nuclear state with big resources. There is no guarantee from nuclear state to the non-nuclear state. It's a permanent member of the Security Council. They can use nuclear weapons. We have seen some, checks and balances from Washington and Beijing. But, of course, it's quite, a shaking ground. We are valuable enough to be covered by the umbrella of military protection. And the process is ongoing in the US and in the European Union. And we have just spoken in person with the colleagues about those trends. And Europeans are thinking about the procedure for changing the decision-making process so that a country having no political power cannot impede solving life-saving questions for the entire alliance. So we don't know how the NATO and the others shall look in 5 or more years. So we need to say that there is no alternative to the NATO, a security guarantee. So creating a new system for global safety, this is bullshit. So intellectually, we can devise on that and brag, but that's not the point. Secondly, there were a lot of articles in the Western media about the Crimea, saying that it's sacred for Putin and he can push the button. No, we must put the Crimea up on the agenda. Because if it's not resolved, Ukraine and the Black Sea and the middle of Europe will be in danger, and the Middle East will be in danger, and Syria as well, and Northern Africa. So the Crimea being returned to Ukraine is a resolution to so many military and security threats, because Russia is creating threats and selling its vicious role, and to say nothing about the technical nuclear weapons available in the Crimea. We should demonstrate that free and liberal Europe cannot exist without Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and Belarus being free. And we should stress not on ethical moments, but on the deliverables to the alliance through our membership.
Mykola Bielieskov is a research fellow at the National Institute for Strategic Studies. He puts the point forward about why NATO should accept Ukraine.
One of the arguments is that there are no alternatives to collective security in terms of fiscal efficiency. So obviously, without the conventional and nuclear umbrella, the price will be much higher. And everyone knows that. Nobody needs to be convinced anymore about the added value of Ukraine to Euro-Atlantic safety, because in 2010s, in the millennia years, we were perceived as an extra burden that is going to distract resources, so you don't have to convince anyone anymore in Europe or in the Atlantic, when 85% of the Russian army is in Ukraine and Russia cannot threaten other NATO members in the east. And another important aspect is that we finally have the understanding that without securing Ukrainian safety, there is no safety in Europe, because previously it was mentioned in the documents back in the 90s. Being aware that without Ukraine, there is no safety in Europe, which was vested in the Charter of the NATO, but practical policies were different. Now we don't have to convince anyone that without Ukraine's security, there is no security in Europe. Before the 24th of February, there were no acting guarantees for Ukraine, but we also didn't have weapons. Our ambition level was at the level of the anti-tank complexes and Stingers, and at present we are at a different cooperation level with our partners. We receive high precision long-range firing systems using that we're using in the three-dimensional battlefield on the ground, at sea, and in the air. Without guaranteeing Ukrainian safety, there is no safety of Europe. We have a good starting position and argumentation in order to become the 33rd member of the NATO. I would like to add that Putin, by his nuclear threats, is shooting himself in the foot, because he's demonstrating that the alternative price of not admitting Ukraine to the NATO, should Ukraine have been under the nuclear umbrella of the NATO, those perspectives would not include Russia's violation of nuclear agreements. In fact, we receive more arguments in favor of Ukraine's admission to the NATO.
Ukrainian philosopher Yevhen Bystrytsky explains what Ukraine has and what it lacks for a NATO membership.
We can see that those 15 or 18 million or billion, apologies, dollars are sabotaged by Hungary and Poland, setting their own requirements. So it's not blackmail, but it's conditioning. Acting in their interest so that the EU can provide assistance to us. So all those arguments are evidence of the fact that Ukraine is not being considered by the Western partners as a full-scale partner. What is the problem? The problem is as one of the most important German philosophers said, is in the asymmetry between the resoluteness of Russia to use nuclear weapons and the Western world being not ready to such resoluteness. Yesterday, the parliament approved the laws needed to satisfy the 7 criteria we need to satisfy to enter the EU. So the democratization process, at least in the form of the legal acts, is ongoing. Regarding economics, obviously economic problems, and the Western partners are aware of that. I believe that those considering our NATO application are even more aware. So what they're thinking of is the structure of the country after victory. So solidarity of the citizens of Ukraine. This war has confirmed that Ukrainians have a single identity cultural and political. To put it in other words, the country has become a solidarity in terms of a political and civil society identity. We can mention here the volunteers who are not fighting at the front line, but they're actively supplying and supporting the army. What is lacking to demonstrate that solidarity is the political solidarity at the level of the elites. We can see that in the conditions of war, the most important state and military decisions, on my subjective opinion, are taken without the sufficient involvement of the opposition. I'm not saying about everybody, but I would like to mention the nationally oriented opposition. What I mean? The thing is that such decisions during the period of war should be taken not by the administrative vertical and the president's office, but it should be an inclusive process.
Rostyslav Balaban from the Yevhen Kuras Institute of Ethnic and Political Studies of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine will explain what Ukraine needs to do to win.
I would like to stress that Ukraine is now protecting the NATO countries and the EU. And should my words have not been true, we would never see Germany increase its military budget twice in the current year, and Poland increasing its personnel twice. And given the fact that the NATO countries were decreasing their contingent since the 90s. So that's the alternative value of security. So playing with Russia led to overpaying. Unfortunately, we can see the behavior of certain Hungarian political groups playing into the hands of Kremlin and not guaranteeing the safety of Europe. So today, we must briefly and blankly say that when there is the law on education or the law on language on the agenda, it's not a question of the language. It's a question about the youth and the elderly and citizens of Ukraine can freely enter, for example, universities. And I will repeat.
В даному випадку дискусія була от перед
that the map of languages and education is needed to enable admission to the higher educational institutions. We need to act if we want to be successful. We need to be one step ahead, because it's clear that after the occupation of Ukraine, the rhetoric may change, like let's postpone, and Russia will continue investing in such projects, undermining our joint security, and we need to be one step ahead.
You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic course dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In our pinned comment, you can find information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please subscribe to our channel, like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!